I'm Shannon Madden, and this video is about my teaching philosophy and how it might work in the Writing Center at MUSC. My teaching philosophy reflects my theory of student learning, which is that students learn best in community through dialogue, interaction, exchange, and collaboration. I strive to prepare students to participate critically and capably in the professional and academic communities that they already inhabit or seek to join. How do you want to use our time today? A focus on community as my guiding orientation allows me to empower writers to recognize and perform the communication practices that are valued in the communities of practice relevant to their career aspirations and professional goals, promote equity and inclusion by inviting writers to draw on their educational, experiential, linguistic, and cultural assets, and foster a sense of well-being and self-efficacy for the writers that I work with. I think, actually, now that I say that, I'm sort of questioning myself, so let me just double check that. When I think of community, I think of theoretical foundations contributed by Lev and Wenger on communities of practice, Tara Yoso on community cultural wealth, and more recent work by DeLeon Gray, Ilan Hope, and Jamal Matthews about belonging and inclusion in educational contexts. These ideas have been critical to my own co-edited and co-authored work on how mentoring, peer interaction, and institutional structures variously enable and inhibit success and self-efficacy for graduate student and faculty writers. I create community in my interactions with writers and researchers in all kinds of contexts, including writing centers, seminars and workshops, online programs, peer group activities, and individual and group consultations. Camp Completion was a week-long writing retreat offered twice per year and designed to help late-stage students make significant progress toward finishing the big projects that are critical to their degree completion, like a dissertation, thesis, article, or prospectus. As part of the camp, faculty, scholars, and residents met with writers in individual consultations and participated in Ask Me Anything panels, where they fielded questions from graduate students about their own experiences, strategies, and struggles as writers. In this way, I created a space where writers at different points on the developmental trajectory were sharing stories as colleagues and thinking together about a wide range of writing habits, routines, and approaches. In leadership roles, I make concerted efforts to build strong relationships with other individuals, offices, and campus entities with an investment in student success. As a writing program leader, I have collaborated with counseling centers, offices of equity and diversity, faculty development offices, and academic departments. My commitment to building mutually beneficial partnerships across campus enables me to leverage existing resources and share expertise across contexts. Trainees in my 4-week grant writing workshop researched in depth the agencies from which they were seeking funding. By studying mission statements, recent awards, and flagship publications, trainees were able to identify the practices and forms of knowledge-making that command power in their professional communities, even as they were developing arguments for innovative research projects that might transform their disciplines. In fall 2019, I piloted group consultations where I facilitated peer-to-peer feedback circles among small groups of 2 to 4 students to supplement the individual consultation model. And even in individualized sessions with writers, I bring an ethic of hospitality and service that promotes a sense of community. I cultivate trust by making myself vulnerable when I tell them about my own struggles as a writer and strategies for resilience. I ask them about their goals and let their agendas drive our sessions together.
I don't know how you do it, Wally. You make it seem so easy.
But no, I really like what you bring to this because if you could look at just, I guess, from a writing perspective, if things flow well, does it make sense to you? Am I articulating myself clearly as I speak? Things like that would be helpful for me.
Okay, great. And your committee wants this presentation to be 20 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So in this section, I share and reflect on clips from a research consultation that I held with Kristen Pender, who we just saw speaking, who is a researcher in the Applied Social and Community Psychology program at NC State and was preparing for her dissertation defense presentation when we met. This was my first time working with Kristen. She was referred to me by her friend Erin Elliott, who appeared earlier in the video and whose thoughts about working with me we will hear at the end. Both women consented to being recorded in their consultations and for the recordings to be used in this video, and they asked to be identified by their names. At the beginning of every consultation, I ask writers to orient our sessions by telling me what they're working on, where they are in the process, and what they need. Kristen had specific goals already in mind, but sometimes writers will just ask for general feedback, like read this chapter and tell me what you think. And whenever that happens, I try to push them to be specific about what they want me to pay attention to, and I encourage them to do the same with their faculty and dissertation committee readers as well. Just like writing, we always read with a purpose, and I want to make sure what I'm watching for when I read their work aligns with their intentions for our consultation. As I hope you'll see in this clip, generative and genuine questions are really important to me in my consultations. I work with writers at all levels as colleagues, and I strive to learn from them, even while providing them with recommendations and tactics for communicating effectively with their target audiences. Along with this, I use questions to encourage students to think about their writing in terms of rhetorical and argumentative moves, as well as genre conventions. So here I am with Kristen. So when you got to the discussion slide, I sort of expected a little bit about like how your project addresses the gap in the literature that you started with.
Yeah.
Would you make that connection for me a little bit? So what was the sort of gap that we didn't know yet, kind of briefly, and then how does your project lead us to something that we didn't know before?
Sure.
In asking Kristen to articulate how her work relates to current conversations in her discipline, I was also sharing with her a typical move that is made in discussion sections and chapters of linking the gap that is set up in the introduction to what your results showed about that gap. Another thing that's really important to me is affirmation. Especially in consultations, I strive to encourage writers and provide feedback that is at least 50% positive. At the same time, I don't give empty compliments, and I make sure my positive feedback reflects a deeply personalized sense of what I perceive to be their strengths as writers. I will remark on what is effective in their document, but I try hard to make the positive feedback about the writer rather than the writing, so that they can be reminded or maybe even become aware for the first time of a behavior or a habit that they already have in their toolkit that is working for them. So first, I'm going to show an early moment in the session where I gave Kristen some critical feedback based on my sense that the presentation had too much in the way of introduction and literature review, given the amount of time allotted for the presentation and the need to focus on results. For me, I don't want to say lost, but it was helpful to hear you say at the end that what you're contributing is coping, or not that's what you're contributing, but that was sort of the focus. Mm-hmm. I wonder if that should be more, because if we look back at the first couple of slides, mm-hmm. there was like definitions of identity and coping and counter story and counter spaces and narrative identity and intersectionality.
Yes.
And then, that slide that you were just on with the 5 different areas.
Okay.
I guess it felt, and I know this is, the theoretical model that you were using. I thought it was really helpful that you just had the box around the bottom so we could know to focus there. Mm-hmm. But I think you might want to think about whether there are ways to sort of hone in on your main point from the beginning. Here, as you heard, I described my experience of her text by referring to my notes about all the terms Kristen defined, and I toss around a couple of ways of thinking about how to winnow down to the most important concepts so she doesn't distract her audience from the key takeaways of her dissertation. Later, I mentioned a really effective way that she defined a term in the middle of her presentation as another possible option for addressing what I called the front-loaded introduction. One thing that you said when you were speaking was a definition of in vivo coding.
Yeah.
I thought that was such a beautiful moment because it was a term that you needed and you defined it so clearly, in the moment.
Okay.
So I think as you're rethinking the sort of intro to this, think about it like that. What do people need to know? And are there better places where I can introduce them instead of front loading everything? This slide, I'm glad you put this one back on here. You might think about defining racial and ethnic rather than multiracial and multi-ethnic, because I imagine some people might have questions about the distinctions between those categories.
Okay.
I guess you could tell me right now, how do you see race and ethnicity as different?
Mm-hmm. That's such a lovely question. So it's interesting to me because
as I watch this back, I wonder if I muddied the waters by encouraging her to define fewer terms and then asking her to differentiate between race and ethnicity for me. And even though it's not a perfect science, that was a genuine question that I had. And she gave a really clear and interesting answer about race as a category associated with power and ethnicity as a cultural identity category. So I learned something from that. And my bigger point, which I think got across, was about making choices that are rhetorical, by which I mean audience-centered and responsive to the constraints of the situation. I also really want students to feel comfortable working with me, and I want them to enjoy our time together. We know that when folks are stressed out and not feeling well, it's much harder for learning to take place. So I strive to create a hospitable atmosphere, and I ask honest questions in a judgment-free way, and I care most of all that they feel welcome and engaged and valued in our interactions around their writing. So I'm going to end with some words from Erin Elliott, who is currently a first-year doctoral student at the University of Michigan studying educational psychology. Erin and I met when she was in her master's program at NC State, and over the last 18 months since then, she participated in several workshops and retreats that I facilitated, and we also had several individual consultations on a range of her writing projects. As I was brainstorming ideas for this video, I asked Erin if she would mind talking about the quality and character of this type of session with me.
I would say working with you is like, you're very encouraging, you are incredibly like empathetic or sympathetic depending on the situation, but both. Like, you care a lot, super compassionate, and you come from a place of understanding as somebody who has done this work before, and writes about this work and researches about this work. Like, you're always trying to put in best practices, and you're always willing to learn. Even yourself, like just now on this call, you're like, I think that's it, but now let me just double check again. I think that's what makes a person really great, is that they're willing to be a good teacher, which requires a person to listen and to mess up and to be right and to both to be wrong. And you show that effortlessly.
Well, thank you so much. You're so kind to say that. So thank you so much again for this opportunity. MUSC is so exciting to me because, as our current moment again makes clear, effective communication about health information is so critical. And as a center and as a team that helps emerging health science professionals and researchers improve their writing, I feel you all are making a really important contribution to the future of public medicine, and I would love to be a part of that. So thank you.